Okay, welcome. Happy to be with you. I'm going to share a topic that I've been interested in since we have the history of our movement and we see its development, but we are aware since 2018 that there's a counterfeit movement. So everything that happens here is also happening there in one way or another. And since the issue of homosexuality, LGBTQ, equality, rights, gender is an important topic for us, it must also be for the counterfeit line. So therefore, I'm going to share with you, Lord willing, the history of homosexuality in the Catholic Church. I guess we all know that the Catholic Church's doors closed basically for homosexuality. Nevertheless, what are its foundations? What are its what is its theological position exactly? What's its history on that? Right. So I would like to look into this with you tonight. I'm going to share my screen. And first of all, would like to have a look here at the Catechism. What is the Catechism to the Catholic Church? What is it? What's its meaning? Who can help me on that? Nobody? Sure, you have an idea. What about my audio? Is it on? Is it off? You hear me? You must hear me. Anyways, so Catechism, what is it? The Catechism is a collection of doctrines. Yes, it's basically the book, or it's the collection of text of the Catholic Church position as a church on what it does believe. So this is, as far the little as that I know, is that there are two major books: Catechism and then there is the canon law. So one is the guidance and the other is then the law, how to put everything, ruling everything, how it works, how the church works, responsibilities, limitations, punishment, whatever. And the Catechism is not dealing with, as I understand, not dealing with the organization, but rather with the belief of the church. So anyway, as you can see, there are lots of points. At point number 2357, the book starts to deal with the issue of homosexuality. Catechisms have been developed. Yes, they have been developing throughout the decade, the history of the Catholic Church. The first, I think, was called 1600, in the 16th century, 1500 something. And it has been worked over and it's been added and changed and etc. So 2357, homosexuality refers to relations between men or between women who experience an exclusive or predominant sexual attraction toward persons of the same sex. It has taken a great variety of forms through the centuries in different cultures. The psychological genesis remains largely unexplained, basing itself on sacred scripture, which presents homosexual acts as acts of grave depravity. Tradition has always declared that homosexual acts are intrinsically disordered. Okay. They are contrary to natural law. They close the sexual act as to the gift of life. They do not proceed from a genuine affective and sexual complementarity. Under no circumstances can they be approved. Okay? So this basically locks the door 100% for homosexuality for a Catholic who's homosexual. There's no way the church will allow and will make any changes in this direction. I don't know if this is comparable, but I understand it's similar if you would want to change the American Constitution. It's basically not possible to change it. So you can make changes here, but something like that, change that is the big thing. And I don't know if this is even possible in theory. So next point, 2358, the number of men and women who have deep-seated homosexual tendencies is not negligible. This inclination, which is objectively disordered, constitutes for most of them a trial. They must be accepted with respect, compassion, and sensitivity. Every sign of unjust discrimination in their regard should be avoided. These persons are called to fulfill God's will in their lives, and if they are Christians, to unite to the sacrifice of the Lord's cross, the difficulties they may encounter from their condition. So what does this point say? What does this point mean here for a homosexual? How do you understand this? I would like some comments. How you understand this second point, 2058 on homosexuality. What does it mean for homosexual? Can there be someone who's homosexual? Can there be homosexuals in the church? Yes.
I don't know, but I think they're saying that homosexuals are sick. I'm not sure if I'm understanding them good. That it's more like a yes, yes and no, because they're looking them like a last condition. Like I don't know if I'm understanding well, but it's look like they're looking as homosexual as a condition that might be like a hopeless one, or am I wrong?
Well, you say it's like they are sick, and I think this is what we can express it that way, because it is objectively disordered. There's a disorder with this person. There's something wrong. Yes, it's not subjectively, it's objectively. There's nothing to argue about. Yes, but in terms of hope, what do you think? Why do you mean there's no hope for them in the church? And so there is a place for homosexuals in the church. Yes, they must be treated well, with compassion, but yes, it's like someone who has an illness, you know, and this illness has to be cured, right? If they are Christians, so these persons are called to fulfill God's will in their lives, and they are called to unite to the sacrifice of the Lord's cross. The difficulties, what does this mean? They are called to unite to the sacrifice of the Lord's cross, the difficulties they may encounter from their condition. What does this sentence mean? How do you understand this sentence?
I think when it says that they need to, how you would say, carry the cross of Christ, and the difficulty that they may encounter in their condition means that they need to suppress it. I mean, they're not looking at it like it's natural. You can go ahead and do that. God accepts that. It's something accepted, and you can be saved by that. They're looking at it like a cross to bear. And I don't think it's a cross to bear.
Does everybody understand it this way? I don't understand it.
What I understand is that they're saying that it's a sin, you know, and so if these persons want to cooperate with the Lord and fulfill His will, then they must repent. In other words, but just in these kind of elaborate words, but basically they're saying that it's a sinful condition and they need to take it to the cross, right? That's what the cross always represents.
Exactly.
So basically they're saying it's a sin, and the only way that person could fulfill God's will is to get rid of this particular sin. So that's what I'm understanding.
I agree. I understand it this way too. So they have to unite it to the sacrifice of the Lord's cross. So they don't, it's not that they have to bear this cross, but they have to unite it to. Yeah. So give it to the cross. That's what I understand. So is this position similar to the Seventh-day Adventist position? Is it or not?
Excuse me, please repeat the question.
If this position, this view, does it differ or is it similar to Seventh-day Adventist position?
As far as I know, it's the same.
Yes. That's what I thought. Right? Does anyone disagree? I think it's just like the Seventh-day Adventists see it. Yes, and they say basing itself on sacred scripture. So it's a scriptural interpretation. You take scripture, the Bible is clear, homosexual acts are totally bad, yes? So this is our position. For this reason, there's no need to move or to change. There's no possibility to change it. It's a hermeneutical issue, right? So let's read the last point, 2359. Homosexual persons are called to chastity by the virtues of self-mastery that teach them inner freedom, at times by the support of disinterested friendship, by prayer and sacramental grace, they can and should gradually and resolutely approach Christian perfection. Yes? So I think this is very similar to what Seventh-day Adventists teach. If there's a homosexual, well, he has the sin and he needs to get rid of it. He brings it to the cross. Christ needs to make him rid of it. Like if you are a smoker, yes, or alcoholic, you need to get rid of this and Christ can help you. And of course, you have to live in chastity. What does this mean? No sexual intercourse whatsoever. Okay. So this is a very, very clear, straightforward, and I imagine a very a position that it's very hurting for homosexual people. Right. So now I'm trying to jump a little bit and give a little overview on the history. These are just the texts the church is using until today, right? The basis on what every discussion has to be based on these points in the church. There's been discussion, of course, but we'll look a little bit, have a little deeper look on that. A second. Okay, here we go. So I think we start with the history of the early church. So this is still like this is after the apostles, right? This time period in the hundreds, 100, 200, 300 AD. And in 305, 6, there has been a synod, or there has been a council of Elvira. And as far as I can understand, it's the first time that in Christian church it has been tried to regulate this issue of homosexuality. It's the first time. We have then in the Middle Ages, in general, they have they include like homosexuality as sodomy. Yeah, this is still, I think this is still a point of view rightly spread. I think that it was Elder Paminda who has been teaching, no, Elder Tess who has been teaching about this recently, right, in the last camp meeting, explaining that sodomy is not homosexuality. There has been a person here from Argentina who has been teaching this in our groups as well, some time already. Okay, anyway, so by doing this, they try to address basically the discipline in the church. Yeah, it was not meant for the fellowship, it was meant for the clerical people in the monastery and the church, right? It was not meant for the lay. So Middle Ages, in the beginning, yeah? Middle Ages. Middle Ages a little bit later. They start persecution. So the church itself, the clerics, they started to stimulate and to motivate people to persecute homosexual in society. And they handed them over to the government for punishment. So the church started to work with the governments, they handed over, as you know, church and state were working together. The state was Catholic, the church helped in this effort, push this issue, and people were in the Middle Ages persecuted because of being homosexual. In the Inquisition, at least in the Spanish Inquisition, there were like some 500 homosexuals killed. All right. All right. So this is like the early church. Then we come to the time period of the church fathers. I won't go very much into detail at all. I just point out some examples to have an idea how this issue developed. You remember what Elder Tess has been teaching about the Greek concept of erastes and oimenos. Is this the right term? I don't know if anyone can correct me.
Yeah, I think that's the right term. It was one is the teacher and one is the student.
Yes. Romanus is the student, Erastus is the teacher. Yeah. So, and this concept is being addressed in the early church, and they tilt this issue as prostitution or as child abuse. Yes. And a homosexual activity. So there's a text which is important. It's called Didache. And in this text will be used in the church later on more all the time as a text that discovers or tilts this activity as a homosexual activity. So they are speaking against. Well, as I said, I don't want to go into details, but for example, John Chrysostomus is living like 347, more or less in this time period. He was saying that homosexuals are locos. What would it be in English? Crazy?
Yeah, crazy, local.
Correct.
Locals, crazy.
Okay. You said some other word, naughty? Anyway.
It's usually crazy.
Okay, so they're crazy, but not in a funny way as we use it sometimes today. Yeah, this man is crazy. No, they are like, they mean it like it. They're really crazy, you know. And what he also says, he says homosexuality is worse than killing. Homosexuality is worse than assassination. Okay, so this is so what you see is we have in the early church. So we have still these erastes, eromenos concept in the Greek world where the church spread in this world. And you have the Roman society. All right, but at the beginning, the church starts to see this issue and tries to control it and to punish it. But now theologians, they start to use arguments, and they say people who are homosexual are worse than killers. Yeah, it's even worse than killing. They're really crazy. So this is, I think, very strong. Okay. Then you have words by a council in Ancira, more or less the same time period, where the church says is they are like degrading themselves like beasts. Okay. like animals. Yeah, yes, that's that's how they see it in this time period. So these are just two examples. Then the Middle Ages, we talked a little bit about it already, but go on a little bit more in detail now. I'm talking toward the end of the Middle Ages. So we have this term sodomy, and sodomy includes homosexuality, relationship with animals. I don't know how you say this in English, bestialismo in Spanish.
Wilderness.
Then,
Okay, wild, salvajismo, tiene que ser.
is it
Bestiality.
bestiality? Okay.
Bestiality.
And even the heterosexual act with no penetration, yes, or with no penetration, no, which is not being done in the vagina, is also sodomy. Yes. Also, the coitus interruptus, when the man basically doesn't finish his coitus, is also sodomy. Masturbation is sodomy, and anal sex, it's in other things. Yes. So in this family of sexual behavior is homosexuality seen in the Middle Ages. The first time I have something from a pope, it's Pope Leon the Ninth, and this is in the thousands, more or less, 1000 AD. He says it's obscene. Yes, homosexuality is obscene. It's dirty. Yes. Right. And then in the more or less in the 1100s AD, persecution becomes stronger. More persecution. Okay, perhaps you know this one name, Hildegard von Bingen. I don't know, she's a saint now. I think so. German, how you say, abbadies. And she said it's the supreme offense against God. So you have, you really can see how this issue becomes like this, you know, homosexuality is seen every time worse and worse and worse and worse. So it's worse than killing. You know, it's a supreme offense against God. So they're just looking for, even to put it, make it like, express it in a way that seeing it like every time worse. Okay. Then you have in the 1200s, the church says it is that sodomites are seen now as give me a second. Yeah, they are seen as demons. Okay. So sodomites are also demons now, so they're equivalent, same thing. So everyone who does one of these shows one of these sexual behaviors, even if you cannot finish your coitus, or you masturbate, or you have a heterosexual act which is not in the vagina, all of this makes you, in the eyes of the Catholic Church, in the 1200 AD, a demon. So I thought supreme offense God couldn't be getting worse, but yes, the church still finds a way to, and this year is Hildegard von Bingen, but this is not the church, the church in itself who says these kind of things. They are demons. Okay, now we will jump, we make a big jump. So this is, as you know, all this time period reaches to the 1300, to this date, and the 160 years of Catholic reign. And I don't have much looked into what happens in between. I jumped right to the modern age. And in the modern age, you have Vatican II. Yes, this council, neither in Vatican I nor in Vatican II, homosexuality is not dealt with. They don't address this, basically, at least not directly. Okay. But the church addresses this issue. Nevertheless, now it's called a crimen pessimum. This means it's the worst crime. And we have record for this in 1917. So this is, it sounds like churches going a little bit back now. Yes. It's the worst crime. Sorry, just goes a little bit back. It goes like on this level here. Yes, supreme offense, worst crime, it's more or less in this. They're not seen as demons. There is no persecution. There is no inquisition. Yes, but it's still seen as the worst crime. Jumping forward, John Paul II. As you know, he was a very conservative pope, and he declares in its encyclica that that homosexuality is a bad thing. Yes, he addresses this issue. He says homosexuality is morally unacceptable. Okay. And what John Paul II does in this time period is they shift the argument a little bit away from what has been said before, And basically, they tilt homosexuality together with abortion. They put them into one basket. Yes. Homosexuality and abortion is one thing. What is the thing that unites these two things? These two totally separate and different acts. What connects them is it is
Births.
say it, please.
Births. Conception or conception, the ability to get pregnant
Yes.
or to conceive.
Yes. Yeah. Exactly. What unites these two things is he says it's a culture of death. Yes. Because sexual acts cannot procreate, cannot make life. Abortion also does not make life. So these are two things that are therefore seen as a culture of death, as he says it. Okay. And let me just quote him. There's one thing here. He writes a book. It is in 2005. No, that's not the correct text. A second. Okay, so this is his last work. It's called Memory and Identity. His last personal work, 2005. He says, he refers to the pressure of the European Parliament to allow homosexual marriage. And then he wrote, it's legitimate and necessary to ask whether this is not part of a new ideology of evil, perhaps more insidious and hidden, which seeks to oppose human rights to the family and to man. So how does this sound to you? This European nation is perhaps part, what they do, their laws, it's in part of an ideology of evil. How you understand this statement?
It opposed the human rights of the family, and the only human right of a family is in marriage, where a man and a woman must marry. I guess that is what it is trying to portray.
Yes. And I also think, yes, please.
Interestingly, he considers other or homosexuality or this parliament or whatever, he considered that as ideology, but not his. His religion is not an ideology, it's something else.
Yes, of course, right? And what he says is that that's the European Parliament. So the EU has an ideology of evil. So I was thinking of a little bit of what many Adventists think, that there is the EU, we don't say it has an ideology, it has an agenda, right? So somehow it seems that this European Union, which is a complex institution, right? It changes leadership, it changes its members, so it's difficult to bring this all under one into one room, basically. But what he says, there is an ideology of evil. Well, anyways, it made me think a little bit of a conspirative worldview. Okay, so we are in modern ages now. And I have some text for you here. Going a little bit back in time, 1966. There is a new catechism in the Netherlands, or the Dutch country, Dutch catechism. And this catechism makes a very interesting point. It says, it's the first post-Vatican II catechism. It's a national, basically, catechism. It's developed in this country. And what those bishops say is the very sharp strictures of scripture on homosexual practices, Genesis 1, Romans 1, must be read in their context as condemning a trend of homosexuality among non-gay people, implying that people who were gay were not condemned for homosexual activity. So what do they understand? They say it's something, Romans and Genesis are not speaking against homosexual activity. They're not speaking against people who are born gay, homosexual, right? They are speaking, these texts are speaking about people who are like following a trend. Yes, like trying it out just for pleasure. So I find this very interesting, and this is a absolutely stunning argument, actually. But it's just this one, this little movement by these Dutch bishops. And then we have 1969. Of course, you remember 1969 is what happens this year. Important for us now.
Which year, sorry?
1969.
Was that Stonewall?
Yes, correctly. It's the very same year of Stonewall. Stonewall was, I think, like in June or July, right? But in the very same year, early in the year, there's a father, Patrick Needorf. He's an Augustinian priest and psychologist. And he starts a ministry for gay and lesbian Catholics as an extension of his personal work. So, and he calls, and this ministry is called, or develops later into into Dignity. It's called Dignity USA. This is the first Catholic movement in favor or pro or helping LGBTQ people. And this is simultaneously to what happened in Stonewall. It's just a little bit earlier. Yeah, but we have the same year. And he says, the Catholic gay people whom I met were frequently bothered by ethical problems and identity with the church. Of course, we've seen it before, right? Well, what the Catechism says. It seemed obvious that the church wasn't meeting the needs of the gay community. In counseling gay Catholics, there always seemed to be an excessive and unreal problem of guilt that was sometimes reinforced in the confessional instead of being resolved. With these ideas rattling around my brain, I wrote a paper on a proposed group for Catholic gays and presented it to our members as a provincial meeting. Most of the priests seemed to be in favor of the idea, so I formed this group and I did it. So this is the beginning of an organized not really movement, right? But an organized help, an organized ministry. Pro, I don't think that he was, I have no idea if he was homosexual. He just wanted to help them. Yes, he wanted to find ways how the church can really profoundly help this community and understand them. Because he says in the church, they really had, the pressure was so high. Okay, 1975, the Catholic Church releases a text, which is released by an institution which used to be called the Holy Inquisition. Anyone has an idea how the name changed later? Because the Inquisition, yes?
Something like reformation of, no, es como hace, es una institución ahora, usted lo
Yes.
traduce, es una institución ahora de control, de supervisión de la doctrina católica, algo así.
Exactly. She says it's an institution which controls or protects the church doctrine. And this is close to how it's named. Yes, it's the Holy Congregation of the Doctrine of the Faith, something like that. This would be like translated from the Spanish. Holy Congregation of the Doctrine of the Faith. This is the famous, what used to be the Inquisition, and the man on the head of this institution, I'm not sure if 75 already, was Joseph Ratzinger. Okay, what does it say? At the present time, there are those who basing themselves on observations in the psychological order have begun to judge indulgently and even to excuse completely homosexual relations between certain people. This they do in opposition to the constant teaching of the magisterium and to the moral sense of the Christian people. A distinction is drawn, and it seems with some reason, between homosexuals whose tendency comes from a false education. So here explaining homosexuality, right? Where does it come from? False education. A lack of normal sexual development. So there's some unnormal development. From habit, from bad example, or other similar causes. And it's transitory, or at least not incurable. Wow. So this is in harmony with the Catholicism, right? You have to take it to the cross. You have to work on it. It is transitory, and it is curable. Yes, it's like a disease. And homosexuals who are definitely such because of some kind of innate instinct or pathological constitution judged to be incurable. So there's another types of homosexuals, and homosexuals who are definitely such because of some kind of innate instinct. So there's another group of homosexuals who have this innate, they are born with this instinct or pathological constitution. There's also a disease or an illness, right? Judged to be incurable. This is why it says there is a distinction drawn. Yes. Two groups of homosexual ones who are just born like this, but they're born with this illness. Yes, as if you have like a blood illness you're born with, perhaps not curable. And others who have like this, like really this constitution not curable. The rest is just educated wrongly or have a lack of normal development, sexual development. They just form this as a habit. Bad example. In regard to the second category of subjects, now it's speaking of those who are born, because the church I'm sure, has been watching like science and has to admit, yeah, well, people are like born like that, you know, you cannot argue against that. It became clearer and clearer. In regard to the second category of subjects, some people conclude that their tendency is so natural that it justifies, in their case, homosexual relations within a sincere communion of life and love analogous to marriage, insofar as such homosexuals feel incapable of enduring a solitary life. So this is now where the church says, okay, this goes too far. I mean, we agree, we accept people are born homosexuals, or some have this disease, there's nothing to be done against it. But if they think now that they can live as in families with someone, marry someone, homosexual partnership, yes, or have a sexual activity with someone else, this is really not accepted. In the pastoral field, these homosexuals must certainly be treated with understanding and sustained in the hope of overcoming their personal difficulties. Okay, and their inability to fit into society. Okay, no pastoral method can be employed which would give moral justification to these acts on the grounds they would be consonant with the condition of such people. All right, so you see that the church is like in this struggle. It has to admit science, it has to say, okay, there are some people that are born like this, but still it doesn't mean that the church would say, okay, it's allowed now. No, it's still seen as a disease, right? Like a calf that is born with a disease or with a defect, it's not suitable for the altar. Yes, it must not be killed, it can live, you know, it can be used, but it's not fit for the altar. It's not allowed. These people here are not allowed to live their homosexuality. Okay, this must be a very grave situation. So I'm going to jump. There's much more, but we are coming to an end now. The church would go back to this. This is an important text here, the persona humana text, persona humana. Very important text, and this church would later come back to this text and explain it because they felt it has been misunderstood or not good enough explained. So there are certain other texts that are released later on, but they always or often refer back to this persona humana text from 1975. Okay, so we'll just jump into our time. So the time here is wrong, the year is wrong. Let me just correct it. 2013. We make a big jump. And we heard suddenly this: if someone is gay and he searches for the Lord and has goodwill, who am I to judge? Pope Francis told reporters, speaking in Italian but using the English word gay. So this was a novum. Yeah, the Pope using this word, gay, it never happened. Vatican experts were quick to point out that Francis was not suggesting that the priests or anyone else should act on their homosexual tendencies, which the church considers as a sin. But the fact that he made such comments and used the word gay was nevertheless revolutionary and likely generate significant discussion in local dioceses where bishops are divided over whether to accept priests or not. So this is an important change. Now, as you can see, if you take his words, look at his words closely, he doesn't say anything which is not in harmony with the church. Yes, he says, if this people searches the Lord, who am I to judge? He does not clarify what he means exactly. The church had already stated that it is homosexual people are welcome in the church. They can be in the church, they can live in the church. It accepts that they have this issue they just do not permit a homosexual lifestyle. No homosexual marriage, children adopting, nothing of that. No homosexual activity, no sex. All right. But anyway, since Francis was using this only by using this word and giving like this statement which sounded so positive, restricted but positive, it was considered as a revolution in the church. Okay. But what actually happened in the church is not very much. Basically nothing. Like 2018, you have an incident. There's another movement which was started in Australia, the Rainbow Sash movement. It comes from Australia. The sash is okay, we read it. Members of the Rainbow Sash movement in Illinois plan to hold a prayer service in the cathedral for legalization of same-sex marriage, an initiative that Bishop Paprocki of Springfield called blasphemous. In 2018, Paul Kalchik in Avondale, Chicago, burned a rainbow flag, which he described as propaganda, following a prayer of exorcism. Rainbow vestments were also destroyed. The flag had originally been displayed at the altar in 1991 to welcome LGBTQ worshippers. So the original intent was they just had this flag just in order to welcome those people, which is totally in harmony with what the church officially says, yes. But this church official came in, he misinterpreted, or he interpreted everything badly, and he burned this flag, he had it burned. Can you imagine this, right? And he made a prayer of exorcism. This is 2018. This is really, however, Kalchik says the report believed his predecessors at the parish had erroneously promoted the gay lifestyle and that the sexual abuse crisis in the Catholic Church was definitely a gay thing. So this is another issue. So you know about the sexual abuse crisis in the church. And what now people like him did in the church, they say these are the homosexuals in the church. They are child abusers. And this has been a fight by movements like Rainbow Sash or Dignity USA, and there are others who are trying to stand up against this claim and say, child abuse is one thing. Homosexuality is another thing. You cannot bring them together. There may be homosexuals who have been abused children, but certainly it's not necessarily a homosexual who has been doing these kind of things. But this is like this argument this kind of propaganda argument that people in the church associate homosexuality with something evil. Okay, and now just recently, last thing here I want to share, 2001, this was in June. On Tuesday, the Vatican confirmed that it had tried to influence the affairs of the Italian state. Influence the affairs of the Italian state by expressing grave concerns about legislation currently in parliament that increases protection for LGBTQ people. And days later, the Vatican's second in command insisted the church had nothing against gay rights, but was protecting itself from leaving the church's core beliefs open to criminal charges of discrimination. And then the report adds, nearly 88 years after Pope Francis famously responded, "Who am I to judge?" on the issue of gay Catholics, it has become increasingly difficult to discern where he stands on the issue. A growing dissonance has developed between his inclusive language and the church's actions. Okay, so if someone is behaving like Francis, his words sound good, his action are as always, basically. How you call this this kind of behavior. What is he doing? Compromising, right? He's sounding nice. He's sounding like reformed. Solange?
No, sorry. I just asking if you can repeat your question again.
Okay, my question was, how do you call someone who speaks nicely, like in favor of gays, but on the other hand, he works as the church always worked regarding gay community? And I said,
We can say,
huh?
okay.
Yes, and I said, well, it sounds to me like a compromise, right? It sounds good for the people, for some. He sounds like a reformed church, and this is what it's supposed to be, right? He has to bring a reformation, but it's a falsification, right? It's a wrong reform. It's not a true reform, and this is something that we really can see here. All right, so there we go. Are there some questions or some comments?
So we can say that this is consensus, compromise, sorry.
Yes.
Also, we can say like is double mind. But I don't think so that is probably is not all the things like looks, because I understand that the papacy, even if he wants Francis, even if he wants to make the change, there is an organization that he is ruling him, and this is one thought that happened in passing my mind. But at the same time, there is another thought that passed in my mind, is that he is the maximum authority. He has the power in his hand to change.
Yes.
Even if this created some great revolution, internal revolution in the Catholic Church, he can do it.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm curious, what is exactly what he content to do it is to give this a step.
Yeah, as you can see, the statement article says it's increasingly difficult to discern where he stands. So it seemed that he was standing on the side of women's rights and LGBTQ people rights. But with the time passing, nothing happening really. This is why this article concludes this way, right? It's difficult to discern where he actually stands.
Yeah.
Someone else? Someone had, I think, his hand up, was about to say something.
Wasn't there a time in the Catholic Church where the office of the bishopry was used by I don't know, homosexuals or probably gays or even lesbians, nuns as a celibacy protection?
What do you mean as a protection from celibacy? It's a way out of, or to circumvent?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. A way out. Just they use the office to go in there and whatever their lifestyle or who they are is protected.
Okay. So there is a priest, so for example, who has a sexual drive, sexual need for sexual intercourse, but he's celibate, so he is not allowed to have sexual intercourse. And for this reason, he finds, or there's not many possibilities, but he can become gay, and this makes it possible. I have also read about the issue that the church had this unofficial position to allow gay priests to do what they want to do, but they have to hide it. Yes, it's not official. It can't be seen in public. It has to be hidden. I read about this years ago. So as long as the priest does what he wants to do and he doesn't do it publicly and he doesn't stand for his rights, as long as he makes it hidden, then it's permitted. I can imagine, I haven't looked much into this issue, but I'm sure this is a reason why some people went into homosexuality. But you know that if a priest wants to have a relationship, he can have a relationship with someone else too. You know, we all know there have been famous popes who had their mistresses, who had their children, right? In monasteries, there have been found so many buried babies because the nuns, all of the nuns had all the time babies, right? So all of this has been possible. It doesn't have to be homosexual. But I think, yes, this is definitely an issue. Yes, goes against nature. Celibacy goes against nature in many cases. Okay, so what I wasn't really able to show here is that, and I need to develop this a little bit better, but if you do a timeline, we have 2018, right, the Midnight Cry. We are 2021 now. And we realized that pre-1989, some things had to be done, right? And then you have 1969, Stonewall, second wave feminism, right? And in the 60s to the 80s, these things, yes, and then this issue of racism. But it's interesting that the Catholic Church is there too. Yeah, it's not an issue so only in society, it's also in the church. So at this point, we just look at this gay issue, and in the church in the very same year, there starts to be a movement in the church too, in favor or helping, positively looking at LGBTQ. There can be certainly more dig out about what happens here, but while in our movement, this issue becomes increasingly an issue being discussed and resolved finally in the church, it seems to be far from being resolved. So there's no true reformation going on. It acknowledges this issue, it has this issue, it's speaking about this issue. The Pope seems to be positive towards this issue, but it's not being resolved. Okay. So we have a parallel development, but this parallel development is like crippled. It's not true. Okay.